when you're aware, when you're being who you are, when you access that consciousness that you are, what you'll notice if you look when you're accessing that, it's important for you to notice there's no questions there. There's no questions there. You have to think to have a question, right? There's no questions. There's no questions in the direct experience of what's so. You know, we talk about knowing, right? We talk about knowing and knowledge, right? But knowing and knowledge, as it's commonly understood and practiced, is subject-object relationships, right? I'm the subject, what I want to know is the object, like that, right? And that's pretty much the way it goes as far as education is concerned, as far as the way, you know, people live their lives is concerned. Subject-object, right? You're the subject, the world is the object. You're the subject, everybody else are the objects, right? However, one of the things that we're discovering through these practices and teachings is that when you are experiencing being aware, when you're experiencing mindfulness, when you're experiencing being aware, it's non-dual. There's no subject-object. Awareness is not a subject trying to know an object. No, awareness is simply aware, and when there's simply awareness, the awareness knows. It's not, you know, it doesn't need to do anything to know. Awareness doesn't need to think to know. Awareness doesn't need to do anything to know. This is something that's very important to understand because it'll allow you to relax. It'll allow you to stop being concerned in terms of, I have to think about this, right? It'll allow you to start letting go of that, I have to think about this, right? And allow you to begin to trust the experience of awareness, in which there's no subject and object. The awareness is simply there being aware of what's so. And it knows, there's a natural knowing, there's a natural awareness of what's happening. When you're experiencing being aware, you actually know more than you do when you think. When you're experiencing being aware of what there is to be aware of, whatever that is, right? Whether that's being aware of what's happening in an interaction in a relationship, whether that's being aware of in your car when you're driving down the street, you know, whether that's being aware any place, any time, right? When you're being aware, the awareness doesn't have a limited understanding of things. When you think about something, the thoughts that you have are something that you have taken from what's so, right, and focused on it and start to process it like that, right? But in awareness, the awareness is including everything that's there. It's not picking on something and processing it in a thought process. It's just aware of everything that's there. That's one of the reasons why in sports that this is something that, especially in the last 10 or 20 years, meditation has been something that's been being part of the training for people in sports, because they know without any doubt when you are able to be aware rather than think, that your ability to act is going to be a lot more effective. And you have a lot more information when you're in an aware state, right? And the thing about it is that there is kind of a letting go involved in mindfulness. There's kind of a letting go and being aware, right? And so part of the training in that is the idea that if you practice consistently to let go, if you practice consistently to be aware of thinking and be able to move attention to awareness itself, being aware, if you practice that consistently, you learn to trust it. You learn that you don't have to think. Most of us are conditioned in such a way where we are conditioned to believe that thinking is necessary. We're conditioned to believe that thinking is necessary. So if you want to be able to have the power of awareness, you have to be able to practice letting go of thinking and then noticing when you're being aware, right, that there's a knowing. When you're practicing meditation and you move your attention from thinking to being aware of the body breathing, right? Do you go into a sudden panic because you don't know what's going on? No. you still know what's going on. You still know where you are. You still know there's a body here. You still know there's a spin class next door. You know, you still know where your house is. You still know who your family is. All that's intact when you're simply being aware. And that's something that through these practices, we have to learn to trust, because the brain and the mind get freaked out when you practice meditation. The brain and the mind don't know what's going on unless there's thoughts about it, right? But you, the consciousness, do know what's going on when there's no thoughts about it. That's the difference, you see. And so one of the things, you know, I've been listening to James Lowe. If you want to listen to a good teacher, he's a Dzogchen teacher. Dzogchen is considered a very high practice of Buddhism, right? And he talks about how in Dzogchen, the purpose of the teachings and the practices is nothing other than to relax and enjoy the view. That's the whole teaching, right? Now, obviously, you can't tell somebody relax and enjoy the view. That won't make any difference. They'll just keep still being crazy, right? So that's why in this particular approach, the fundamental teachings of Buddhism are still there, right? And then it comes down to that there's really nothing that needs to be done. Nothing needs to be done. No changes need to occur, right? Everything, in fact, in Dzogchen, it's called the great perfection, the great perfection. In other words, it's done. The great completion. In other words, it's done. There's nothing that needs to be done. It's done, right? So the practice is, so in this practice, they're just trying to help tame you. You see, the practice is about taming you like you're a wild animal. You know what I mean? Taming you, you know, getting you to focus attention and learn to relax and develop a sense of the view. What is the view, right? The view is what everything looks like from awareness. That's the view. How everything looks from awareness. And the way everything looks from awareness is different from the way it looks when you think about it. It's different, two different things, right? In fact, one of the things they say, and this is something that's kind of interesting, they say that the thought process, the way the thought process makes a mess, right? That the brain and the brain and the mind are always automatically reacting to stimuli, right? The brain and the mind are always automatically reacting to stimuli, right? If you really pay attention, right, and you really notice what happens when things are happening, right, is that when the brain reacts to stimuli, right, the person reacts to the reaction the brain had. This is a little more, this is taking it a little further, right? So something happens and anger comes up from the system, right? Something happens, the brain's reaction to that is anger, right? And then the person notices they're angry, right? And then they create a story with the anger, right? To explain the anger, right? Because they're uncomfortable with it, and it registers for them that maybe something's wrong, maybe I'm in danger, right? And so the person's reacting to the brain. So one way you could talk about these things is you could say that the only relationship you ever have in your life is with your brain. Because what's happening is being reacted to by the brain, and then the person, right, is aware of the brain's reaction and reacts to the reaction. And that's how it turns into a mess, right? And so the practice of being aware, the practice of mindfulness, is the practice of simply, rather than continuing to be involved in that reacting to reactions and automaticity and mechanicalness and all that stuff, right? That you simply become aware of it. You become the awareness of that instead of that. That's all. You become the awareness is always here, right? And so the practice is to notice what's going on. And when you notice what's going on and you see the machinery, you see what's going on is thoughts that are reacting to what's happening based on past experience, and you see that whole thing going, right? That you simply become aware of it. And when you become aware of it, the awareness knows what's going on without an interpretation of it. The awareness knows what's going on without an interpretation of it, and the awareness has the ability to respond to what's going on directly, immediately, without the thought process, right? But that has to be something that's refined, because as you're doing the practices and the teaching, right, you're practicing not getting sucked in by the thought process, right? So the thought process comes up, right? So an example would be, if in your relationship with somebody that you're close to, that you have an emotional involvement with, right, something happens, and when that happens, it triggers a reaction, right? And you start feeling anger. And along with that anger comes a story, you know, oh, this person did that to me, and this isn't fair, and I have to protect myself, and, you know, blah, 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 right? And so that takes over, that gets your attention. You become the angry person with the story, and then your actions follow that, right? But with the practice of mindfulness, with these practices, you're training yourself to notice when that happens. You're training yourself to notice when that spike in energy happens, when the anger comes up, right? And you're training yourself to notice that, because you know that when you're upset is when you're the craziest, right? So when that comes up, you start paying close attention to it, right? And then there is, the person reacts to being angry, right? And wants to control the situation and all the other things that go on, right? But if you're practicing these teachings and practices, when that happens, you notice that that's a thought process that's going on, right? And you start to get related, right, directly present, right, to what's actually happening, right? And here's the interesting thing. If you get present to what's actually happening, a natural response will occur. And it won't be because you thought to do anything. It'll just happen. This is what people in high performance situations are after. They don't want to think to do anything. They want to get into a space of the zone, right, where what's happening happens and they respond to it immediately. No thought, right? No thought. And they also know when that happens is when there's skillfulness. When that happens, there's effectiveness, right? Because there's no intermediary process. It's stimulus and response, no intermediary process, right? But we don't trust that. We don't trust that. It's crazy, because we trust what happens after thinking about it, right? And we consistently ignore the fact that it doesn't work, right? We want to continue to do what we do after thinking about it. Something happens, right? Somebody does something around you, and you think about it, and you get upset, and you get angry, right? And you actually believe the thinking about it works. You know, you believe that, oh, if I think about this, then this person won't be able to get over on me. If I think about this, you know, they can't take advantage of me. I'm going to be, you know, watching, you know, and all that. So you think you're being more effective by thinking about it, and it's the opposite. You're being less effective by thinking about it. And that is true about everything, especially this, right? Because the more you think about this, right, the more difficult this gets. Did you notice? Did you notice? Yeah, the more you think about this, the more difficult this gets, right? Because, why? Because when you think about it, you're putting legs on the snake. When you think about it, you're adding something to what we're doing here that's not necessary. It's not necessary to think about anything to be present. No, all you have to do is notice whether you're thinking. It's not necessary to think about anything to be present. All you have to do is notice when you're thinking, and when you're thinking, you're not present. You're thinking. It's like that. See, the way the person relates to awareness is, I'm aware. My experience is. See how sneaky it is? It claims everything all the time. The way the person relates to things is to talk about it in terms of my experience, my awareness, right? Once that's out of your mouth, the rest of it is lost. It's not my awareness, it's awareness of me. Do you understand? When you're practicing meditation and you move your attention from thinking to the body breathing, right? It's not my awareness, being aware of the body breathing. It's awareness and the body breathing. That's it. There is, and the reason that that's important and that's the case, because if you bring the delusion with you, you're not being mindful. You're being a person being mindful. That's not mindfulness. You can't get outside of reality and look at it. You can't do that, right? And so what the Eastern practitioners are telling us is that, so since you can't do that, stop trying to do that. You can never do that, right? But you can have a direct experience of what's happening. And that direct experience of what happened is of what's happening can have validity, can be true, can be useful, can be workable, right? But once you put it into a scientific paradigm, it won't work. As you identify yourself with it, it changes it. Right? Something arises, anger arises, I am angry, I just changed it. Do you see that? Anger arises, that's what happened, right? My interpretation of it is I am angry, and now I suffer. Right. But anger arises on its own, right? You don't get angry, that's the illusion, right? Anger arises on its own. If you're awake and you see anger has arisen, that's what you see. Anger has arisen. It's not my anger. It may not be rational. It may have nothing to do with anything. Anger has arisen. It's a stimulus response process. So the brain gets triggered and the brain produces anger. If you're awake, that's what you see. Anger has arisen. That's what you see, right? If you're not awake, anger has arisen, but you're not aware of that. By the time you become aware of it, I'm angry. You missed the whole anger has arisen part. Now, you identify with it. Same way you do with thinking, right? You identify, and that's going to be something that continues because it's such a intense habit that you will continue to do it. And in the beginning of this learning and practicing, in the beginning, all you can expect is to notice that. It's expecting too much to think that you can go further than that in the beginning, because this is a bad habit. You know what I mean? Every once in a while, you might get in front of it, right? But in the beginning, it's just a matter of noticing in that. And that's why I have been saying recently, because remember when this works, it's not a doing. And what the brain is going to tell you is, oh, well, do this, do that. You know, what? And that's why what a lot of people's questions are, you know, well, how do I do this? What do I do? Tell me what to do, right? But it's not a doing, right? So that's something to keep in mind. It's not a doing. The light of awareness, when the light of awareness shines on what's happening, right? What's happening is seen for what it is. That's all. You know, when the light of awareness shines on anger, it's aware of the anger and it's aware of the story that's generated in relationship to the anger. But it doesn't identify with the story. You see? That's the difference. And because that's a difference, you have freedom now. Otherwise, it's automatic. It's automatic. It just happens, and you believe it, and you justify it, and you'll swear by it, and all that other bullshit, right? See if you can practice slowing down and looking at what's going on from the view of awareness, rather than identify with the thoughts about it. Because when you talk about it, that's what you're expressing. You're telling me what you think. You literally say it, right? It's not so much a question of how you say it. It's a question of how you're experiencing it, how it's occurring for you, right? If the way it's occurring for you is consistent with what we're teaching and practicing, that's how you'll express it. Or it may not even occur as something to talk about or express. When you practice meditation, I like what you said in terms of the body awareness, right? Because when you practice meditation, that's part of it, is to become aware of the body, not identify with it, but become aware of the body and aware of the tension in the body, right? Because one of the things that has to happen for us to experience being present is to relax, which means this body, right? Become aware of the tension so the tension can release. If you banged your hand, right? Yeah. And you yelled, right? Yeah. That'd be the brain. Yeah. That's the brain, right? Okay. And then after that you would think, oh, what a stupid thing to do. That's you. Yeah, that's me. Got it. Right? Yeah. And all I'm saying is just to notice that, that's all. Just to notice that, because the thought that you had, the thought process is where you're creating suffering. It's very difficult to talk without being the person, because your language that you are used to using is personal, right? And one of the things that's very important to understand about this work and these processes, it's not personal. Awareness is not personal. Yeah, but you have learned to be one and speak as one. And that's, so when you open your mouth, the person's going to come out of your mouth. Simple as that. And it's not so much, see the thing, and I want to be clear with you, it's not so much about how you say it. Do you know what I mean? Because this is how sneaky the person is. They'll say, teach me how to say it right. And then I'll just say it right and we won't have a problem. It doesn't matter what the truth is. You see what I'm saying? That's how sneaky the person is. The person will learn to be spiritual, right? The person will learn to be spiritual, will act spiritual, and will feel that they're superior because they're spiritual. The thing about it is that if you're experiencing it with clarity, right, then you don't have to get involved in, oh, I better be careful how I say this. You know, it's like people say, you know, when people that get involved with these teachings and work, I notice that people will go to share something, they'll say, I think, oh no, I don't think. I shouldn't say that. You know, that's the ego. The ego's trying to get it right,
But
right?
it's also the training that you're giving us. Stay away from thinking.
No, see, now what? That's the person. That's the person trying to mess with me. Really, because I have never said stay away from thinking. Have I?
Not so many words. But
Right, not so many words. My interpretation of what you said was that. You see? I was thinking about what you were thinking.
I was thinking about what you were saying to teach me how not to think.
Yeah, but I'm not trying to teach you how not to think. In fact, what I'm saying to you is all I am ever saying is just notice. That's the teaching. That's mindfulness is just notice. Be aware of what's happening. When you're thinking, know you're thinking. That's all. Because you understand through the teachings that thinking is a very limited way of being, right? So if you understand that, what do you want to do? Be aware when you're thinking. That's all. You can't stop thinking. You didn't start thinking, so how can you stop? Right? But you can be aware of thinking, and you can know when thinking is occurring and you're using it as a way of determining what's happening, and you're using as a way of determining what actions you're going to take. It's a very limited, unskillful way of operating. That's what you're learning, right? Therefore, when thinking is happening, you want to be aware that it's happening. That's all. It's not going to stop, right? You just want to be aware that it's happening. And when you're aware that it's happening, you have a choice about whether that's what you use to determine what to do, or whether what you're aware of is what determines what you do. That's the whole ballgame. And the way you be present is to notice that you're not. That's how you be present. You can't be present just by wanting to be present. No, you have to notice what's happening when you're not present. And when you know, see, that's the whole mechanism. When you notice that you're not present, you're present. So that's how you become present, is noticing that you're not. That's the whole mechanism. That's why we practice the meditation technique. When you're thinking, you're not present. You notice that, be present. Simple. No, not simple?